In September 1993, beloved music tutor Caroline Miller, 42, vanished from the small town of Ashbury Falls, Vermont, just hours before her evening lessons. The maple-lined streets had just begun their autumn transformation, splashing the quaint New England town with hues of amber and crimson. As shadows lengthened across Caroline's Victorian home on that Tuesday afternoon, no one could have predicted the darkness that would soon envelop the community for decades to come. Detective James Prescott rubbed his tired eyes as he parked his aging Crown Victoria in front of the Miller residence. At 48, with salt and pepper hair and a perpetually wrinkled shirt, Prescott had served Ashbury Falls for over 20 years. He'd handled domestic disputes, teenage vandalism, and the occasional burglary, but never a disappearance that would eventually become the town's most notorious cold case. The Victorian home stood silent, its gabled roof and ornate trim bathed in the golden light of late afternoon. Caroline's 1989 blue Honda Accord sat in the driveway, exactly where she'd parked it after returning from the grocery store that morning. Prescott noted the perfectly trimmed hedges and the wind chimes that swayed gently on the porch, everything in its place, just as neighbors described Caroline herself. Methodical. Precise. Predictable. Detective? A voice trembled behind him. It was Margaret Barnes, clutching her daughter Chloe's hand so tightly the girl winced. We found the door open. She never misses lessons. Never. Chloe, a lanky 12-year-old with auburn hair pulled into a tight ponytail, stared at her shoes. Her metronome was still ticking, she whispered. Her coffee cup was half full. It was still warm. Prescott nodded grimly and ducked under the yellow police tape that now adorned the white picket fence like a macabre decoration. Inside, the house felt suspended in time. Caroline's purse sat on the entryway table, keys tossed casually beside it. A grocery list with eggs, milk, sheet music for Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata written in neat cursive lay nearby. In the kitchen, a half-prepared sandwich, turkey and Swiss on whole wheat, no crust, waited on a cutting board. Nothing's missing? Prescott asked Officer Reynolds, a rookie who'd been first on the scene. Not that we can tell. Wallets in her purse, $43 cash. All credit cards present. No signs of forced entry or struggle. The music room told the same story. A leather-bound planner lay open on the piano, lesson times neatly blocked out in different colored inks. Tuesday, 5 p.m., Chloe Barnes, Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. Prescott ran his finger along the polished black surface of the grand piano. Who saw her last? Ronald Kearns, Reynolds replied, flipping through his notepad. Elderly neighbor across the street. Says he saw her talking to someone in a dark sedan by her mailbox around 3:45. Couldn't make out the driver. Surveillance cameras? In Ashbury Falls, detective? Reynolds chuckled nervously. The only camera in town is at the bank, and it doesn't cover Elm Street. As twilight descended, Prescott interviewed neighbors one by one. The portrait they painted was consistent. Caroline Miller, divorced and childless, had moved to Ashbury Falls in 1975 after graduating from Juilliard. She'd established her piano studio almost immediately, attracting students from across 3 counties. She was known for her gentle corrections, her patience with beginners, and her absolute insistence on punctuality. She was quiet but kind, said Martha Wilson, who lived next door. Kept to herself mostly, except for her students. Some days I'd hear her playing late into the night, hauntingly beautiful pieces, always practiced to perfection. Any boyfriends? Visitors? Prescott asked. Martha hesitated. Not really. She seemed married to her music. Although. She lowered her voice. That handyman had been around a lot lately. Eli something. Tall fellow, bit rough around the edges. Prescott's interest peaked. Rough how? Just not her type, you know. Caroline was refined, cultured. This man had tattoos on his knuckles and spoke with a harsh accent, Boston, maybe. She hired him to fix some plumbing issues last month, then he started coming back to tune the piano. I saw him watching her through the window once when she was teaching. Just watching. Back at the station, Prescott pinned Caroline's photo to the investigation board. Her intelligent eyes gazed back at him, a slight smile lifting the corners of her mouth as she sat at her piano. It was a publicity shot from a recent charity recital at the Ashbury Falls Community Center. "What do we know about this Eli Dawson?" Prescott asked Sergeant Harper, his longtime colleague and friend. Harper slid a thin file across the desk. Elijah Eli Dawson, 38. Moved here from Boston 3 years ago. No family locally. Works odd jobs, plumbing, carpentry, piano tuning. One prior for aggravated assault in Massachusetts, bar fight, but charges were dropped. Rents a cabin on the outskirts of town. Let's bring him in. Eli Dawson sat unnervingly still in the interrogation room, his large frame making the metal chair seem child-sized. His hands, calloused, with "hold" and "fast" tattooed across the knuckles, rested on the table. His eyes never left Prescott's face. "I tuned her piano twice a month," he said, his voice surprisingly soft for such an imposing man. "She was particular about it. Said the humidity from the nearby creek affected the strings." "When did you last see her?" "Week ago Monday. Fixed a leaky faucet in her powder room." "And Tuesday?" Eli shook his head. "Wasn't there Tuesday. Was in Burlington, getting supplies." He slid a receipt across the table. "Parkway Hardware, 3:20 to 4:15 p.m. You can check." "We will," Prescott assured him. "Ms. Miller ever mention feeling threatened? Worried about anyone?" A flicker of something, concern. Guilt, crossed Eli's face. "No. Well, not exactly. She did say one of her adult students gave her the creeps. Private lessons, evenings. Guy in his 40s who suddenly wanted to learn piano. She said he stared at her hands too much. Name? Never said. Just that he was some businessman who'd recently moved to town." Prescott leaned forward. "Mr. Dawson, Caroline's colleague at the community center mentioned she felt uncomfortable around you. Said you made inappropriate comments." Eli's jaw tightened. "That's bull. I respected Ms. Miller. She was a real artist. He looked down. "I asked her out once, for coffee. She declined, politely. That was it." The investigation expanded. Prescott interviewed every student, every parent, every acquaintance. Days turned into weeks. The autumn leaves fell, decomposed, and were replaced by snow. Caroline's face stared out from posters on community bulletin boards, from the local newspaper, from a segment on Vermont's evening news. Theories multiplied: mental breakdown, secret lover, random abduction. Each dissolved under scrutiny. The dark sedan mentioned by Ronald Kearns became a focus, a vehicle spotted in neighboring towns around the same time as other missing persons cases, but nothing concrete emerged. Winter thawed into spring, and Prescott found himself regularly driving past Caroline's house, now draped with untamed ivy, its garden overtaken by weeds. He'd catch himself listening for phantom piano notes, wondering if ghosts practiced nocturnes. By summer, the case file had grown thick with interviews and dead ends. Eli Dawson remained the primary person of interest, but his alibi held firm. The hardware store's security footage showed him clearly, timestamp matching his receipt. "Maybe we're missing something," Harper suggested during a late-night review session. "What about former students? Any who failed or got rejected?" "All accounted for," Prescott sighed. "The only loose thread is this mystery businessman student Eli mentioned, but none of Caroline's records show evening lessons for adult male beginners. Could Eli have invented him? A red herring?" Prescott stared at the caseboard. "Maybe. Or maybe he exists but wasn't actually her student. Could have been using lessons as a pretext for something else. New leads trickled in occasionally. A waitress in New Hampshire thought she'd served Caroline. A music teacher matching her description had applied for a job in Maine using false credentials. Each fizzled out under investigation. The case grew colder with each passing season. Prescott found himself haunted by Caroline's students, especially little Chloe Barnes, who'd stopped playing piano altogether. "The music doesn't sound right anymore," she'd explained when he ran into her mother at the grocery store. "It's like all the notes are missing something important." In 1996, the investigation suffered another blow when Eli Dawson abruptly sold his tools, terminated his rental agreement, and moved to Florida. Though not technically a suspect, his departure stirred renewed suspicion. Prescott tried tracking him through law enforcement channels, confirming only that he'd taken a maintenance job at a resort in the Keys. Life in Ashbury Falls attempted to return to normal. Caroline's house was eventually sold to a young couple who renovated it extensively, removing the music room entirely to create an open-concept living area, a change that struck Prescott as a desecration, though he kept this thought to himself. Then, in the crisp autumn of 2001, nearly 8 years after Caroline vanished, 2 hikers exploring the overgrown grounds of the abandoned First Light Church camp discovered disturbed soil behind the caretaker's cabin. Their dog had obsessively dug at the spot, unearthing what they initially thought was an animal bone. It wasn't. Prescott stood in the rain as the forensics team carefully excavated the grave. The skeletal remains emerged inch by inch: a femur, ribs, a pelvis, and finally, a skull with a prominent fracture at the base. Most haunting were the hand bones. Several fingers had been broken, with fracture patterns suggesting they'd been deliberately snapped one by one. She was buried face down, the medical examiner noted. Unusual. Sometimes done as a sign of disrespect. DNA testing wasn't necessary. Dental records confirmed what everyone feared. Caroline Miller had been found, but justice remained elusive. Prescott combed through the old files with renewed urgency. The church camp had closed in 1988 due to financial troubles, its buildings gradually reclaimed by nature. He discovered the property shared a back access road with a storage facility where Eli Dawson had once rented a unit. More damning, lab tests on soil and fiber evidence recovered from the grave site found 3 carpet fibers matching the distinctive blue upholstery from Eli's 1985 Ford pickup truck. The truck itself had been sold years earlier, but photos from town events showed the unique pattern. "We need to talk to Dawson," Prescott insisted to the district attorney. "These fibers place him at the burial site." "It's circumstantial," the DA cautioned. "Fibers could have transferred many ways. And his alibi for the abduction still holds. Maybe he didn't abduct her. Maybe someone else did, and Eli disposed of the body later. He knew her schedule, her habits. He could have been an accessory." A Florida detective was dispatched to question Eli, only to discover another bizarre twist: Eli Dawson had vanished 1 month before Caroline's body was identified. His girlfriend reported he'd gone fishing and never returned. His boat was found drifting empty 2 miles offshore, his tackle box and a half-empty beer still on board. "Too convenient," Prescott muttered when he received the report. "He knew we'd find her eventually. He ran. Or someone silenced him too," Harper suggested. "If he was involved but not the killer, maybe the Real murderer tied up loose ends." The mystery businessman student remained elusive. Prescott developed a theory that Caroline had accidentally witnessed something, perhaps related to Ashbury Falls' growing opioid problem, and was silenced as a result. Maybe Eli had similar knowledge and met a similar fate. Years passed. Prescott retired but continued investigating privately, filling a spare bedroom with case files and theories. He'd sometimes visit Caroline's grave at Peaceful Pines Cemetery, where anonymous donors regularly left sheet music weighted down by smooth river stones. In 2015, Prescott's health began failing. Diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's, he fought to preserve his memories of the case, recording details and theories on countless legal paths. His most coherent theory centered on William Dufresne, a pharmaceutical executive who'd lived in Ashbury Falls briefly in 1993 before relocating to Chicago. Dufresne had taken exactly 3 piano lessons from Caroline, a fact missing from her records but confirmed by a check carbon found in a bank statement. Prescott had been unable to interview him before the dementia took hold. By 2024, James Prescott resided in Ashbury Falls elder care, his once sharp mind frequently clouded. On his lucid days, he still spoke of Caroline Miller, of broken fingers and buried secrets. A national true crime podcast, drawn by the case's unusual elements, featured Caroline's story in a 3-part series titled The Silenced Keys. New tips flooded in. Most importantly, advances in DNA technology offer the possibility of identifying genetic material preserved under Caroline's fingernails, evidence collected in 1993 but too degraded for the forensic techniques available then. As Ashbury Falls prepared for its annual memorial recital honoring Caroline, now a community tradition, Detective Leah Martinez, Prescott's protégé, sat beside his wheelchair, carefully showing him photographs from the reopened case file. "We found something interesting, James," she said gently. William Dufresne's son attended Ashbury Falls Middle School in 1993. He was one of Caroline's students, not the father. And guess who the boy's mother hired after the divorce to help move their piano to Chicago? Prescott's rheumy eyes widened with momentary clarity. "Eli," he whispered. Martinez nodded. "We think Dufresne was having an affair with Caroline. His wife found out, confronted her. Things got violent. She hired Eli to help clean up afterward, maybe using their son's music education as leverage." The sedan. Registered to Catherine Dufresne. Dark blue Cadillac. Fingers? Prescott asked, his voice barely audible. Martinez hesitated. "We think that was Catherine's rage. Breaking what made Caroline special. The crime lab is testing the DNA now." Prescott's gaze drifted to the window, where autumn leaves spiraled down from maple trees, just as they had on that September day 31 years ago. Somewhere in the distance, piano music drifted from an open window, perhaps a student practicing for the memorial recital. "Will you get her?" Prescott asked, a moment of perfect lucidity breaking through the fog. "Catherine Dufresne?" Martinez squeezed his hand. "We're close, James. Catherine died 3 years ago, cancer. But we found her journals. And the DNA might still tell us if William was involved. There's a chance someone will finally answer for what happened to Caroline." As dusk settled over Ashbury Falls, the music room that once echoed with Caroline Miller's gentle instructions now existed only in memory. But the questions remained, haunting the town like an unfinished melody. Who had silenced the piano teacher? Was it a jealous wife, a complicit husband, a handyman drawn into a deadly conspiracy? Or some darker combination of secrets not yet revealed? And perhaps most troubling of all, had Eli Dawson been a villain who escaped justice, or another victim whose body still lay undiscovered? In Ashbury Falls, the case remained both open and unfinished, a composition waiting for its final notes, a mystery that continued to resonate through time.